So let's welcome on the panellists that I'm going to be talking about. How does a city work at the local scale to help build that creative workforce? Now, this panel, starting with Andy Miah, who is Chair of Science, Communication and Future Media at the University of Salford. Andy, everybody. Next up, the Programme Manager at the Factory Academy, Kiran, Sethi, ladies and gentlemen. And last but definitely not least, I love this city that Joanne is from, Marion Centre of Excellence in Belfast, Joanne Dunn. Okay, right. Okay, I always say when I kind of meet young people and they want to get into the media, I do tend to say to them, getting in this game is can be relatively straightforward. Staying in it is the really difficult part of it for a number of reasons that I think we're going to talk about now. What do you see as the purpose, Andy, starting with you, because you're in the education sector? What is the purpose of what you are doing? There you go. Big question to start with.
Question to kick us off.
Why are you bothering? There you go.
Well, you mentioned education institutions.
Yes.
And I think that whole concept has just expanded dramatically.
Do you like the word institution?
You know, I partly do. I think it's important to have organisations that work together collaboratively. But I think what's happened certainly in Greater Manchester over the last few years, certainly since I've been at Salford University for the last decade, is just how much collaboration has taken place. And so 10 years ago, we were on the verge of becoming the European City of Science. And that gave rise to a collaboration across the universities, schools, and the legacy of that still remains. So, and it's interesting hearing this morning's talk where you hear conversations about the importance of collaboration, but we were just saying before we came on, it's just ongoing work that doesn't end. And that's, for me, what the institution's capability really is as its strength, is bringing people together. And that requires stepping outside of disciplines, bringing people outside of their comfort zones. And for me, that's what the education institution should be doing, allowing people to find new ideas, discover new ways of thinking, of working together, and of course, innovating. So the institutions are, one of the best education institutions for me is TikTok. I mean, it's incredible how many creators are on there sharing incredible resources for young learners. And of course, it's a place where young people go to discover things. So education, I think, is going through a repurposing that universities are part of, but doing that very much in dialogue with colleges, with schools. We have now the Greater Manchester Institute of Technology here, which is a great way to bring people together and to find, as Andy was saying earlier, that Manchester Baccalaureate, a different way of thinking about what education can be.
And Kiran, just tell us about Factory Academy, what its mission statement is, and how it's setting about achieving that.
So Factory Academy is the skills and training arm of Factory International, and its mission is to open doors to the creative industries, prioritising people from underrepresented backgrounds, but not exclusive to. And it's a reality that most of us have all experienced in some way or another, whether you've seen it firsthand or experienced it firsthand, that diversity is a real issue within this industry, and to really make the most of it, you need to include as many stories as possible. So our approach is focusing on the professional aspects. We don't do the artistic development, but we do the personal and professional development, which is needed to be able to access jobs, any kind of job within this sector. So it's a really important one because I think our approach is very much on the ground. We've got Factory International, which is obviously in the name, international, taking its work around the world, but Factory Academy is really based in Greater Manchester. That's what it's about. It's about having a presence by going to job centres, going to community groups, letting them know about the work we do and letting them know there is opportunities, because quite often a lot of people we connect with have never even thought this is an opportunity or a potential for them. But it's those conversations that you have and being there present and actually giving people advice. The other thing, which is obviously a real privilege to Factory Academy, is the space that we can afford. So actually having Aviva Studios, bringing a young person to that space, or even someone who's a bit older but never thought about it as an opportunity, really has that impact. And then once they're in the building, actually be able to provide education, support, well-being, and most importantly, at the end, our courses ladder into opportunities. So wherever possible, there'll be guaranteed interviews at Factory International, Manchester International Festival, but other employers in the city.
Brilliant. Joanne, I think it was tail end of last year, I visited Belfast as the charity Cinemagic and went and spoke to young people there who wanted to get into TV and film, and I just found it utterly inspiring and unbelievably powerful voices of young people who've had a very different experience in many ways to those here in Manchester. So what are the specific urban challenges, Joanne, facing Belfast that the Marion Centre for Excellence is seeking to address?
Okay, so the Marion Centre of Excellence came up because the mental health challenges that are facing young people who have a lack of opportunity for opportunities for really creative interests. So obviously with the history of Belfast, there was obviously a lack of foreign direct investment, the decline of the ship industry, unemployment was high, and there wasn't really many opportunities for jobs. So that sort of changed people's mindsets that they would go for the more safe traditional roles. So schools' curriculum was designed around those safe traditional roles. Young people's parents were encouraging them to go into those safe traditional roles. But the young people coming, growing up now, they grew up in a different Belfast. Belfast has changed dramatically. They have a completely different mindset. Maybe the creative opportunities that their parents did have, the creative talents that their parents did have, but weren't able to access them. They don't feel like that. They feel like, yes, I want to access those opportunities. It's creativity that excites me. It really feeds my soul. That's the pathway I want to go down. But obviously there's no opportunity in schools for that. They don't have the opportunity at home or the means. So they just disconnect. They feel like there's no sense of purpose in the world, and that leads to impacting their mental health, leads to depression, anxiety, disconnection, and they just feel lost in the world. So the Marion Centre of Excellence was set up to give them a pathway into the creative industries. By starting with, they come to us, we do a bit of coaching with them, find out what they want to do, and then we facilitate that to lead them into that pathway, working with different industries. You talk about Cinemagic, we also work with film or NI Screen, and we also work with a lot of different industries in terms of entrepreneurship and enterprise to allow them to work freelance. So those barriers that were stopping them and entering the career that they wanted to aren't there when they finish as well, because they can sort of work for themselves. So it's just really a change in mindset of people, their parents as well, so that we're a catalyst for change, so that people actually think, I do want my child to go into the creative industries. There is a good job, there's opportunities for them, and rather than putting them off it. So I see these young people as a role model for the future, as people see they've done okay, so I'll follow that pathway too.
Yeah, there's something very powerful. You need to see it to be it, isn't it?
Yeah,
incredibly powerful. Andy, there's this twin conversation happening simultaneously about artificial intelligence. There seems to be like a news version of it, which is largely based around fear. And then I'll do some work with Google in Dublin, and it's not about fear. It's about kind of optimism, and it's about imagination, etc. In terms of being an educator and the pace of change, technological change, how are you talking to young people about artificial intelligence and how it will impact upon their own creative journey?
Well, in very simple terms, every lecture I give, I talk about AI now, whether it's on the biomedical course, the wildlife course, the arts courses we have. And it's remarkable to me to see the different perspectives, but also different levels of knowledge about it. I mean, so many I think a lot of us assume ChatGPT is out there, everyone's using it, there's a degree of familiarity about it, but it's really not
and getting
the case.
Caught out when they do their essays.
A little bit of that, certainly, but I think that there's far less competence and knowledge, especially in how to use these things in an advanced way than we might imagine. So last year at the University of Salford, we put on the map making AI part of all of our curriculum to try to encourage those sorts of conversations about what it's doing to whatever sector you're working in, but also to understand what's happening with the student population. So I think it's become something that is a topic on everybody's minds, but at very different levels. And I'm very conscious of how when our students arrive into university at the age of 17, 18 years old, we assume they've sort of gone on this digital journey where we think of them as kind of native to this world, but it's just really not the case that I have found, that there is that degree of either competence or indeed interest. So it's a massive shift for people to think about operating within this space. And I think that we're a very challenging place, certainly here in the UK, and I'm conscious we have a global audience here. but we're at a point where we're thinking about banning social media, banning mobile phones in schools, lots of people on board with these ideas, and at the same time saying, your future's in digital, and make sure you figure that out. So I think there's a huge, I mean, my son grew up with STEM after-school STEM clubs, which is very fortunate in his school to have that, but we don't have after-school digital skills clubs. And that sort of thing, I think, that informal learning, which is where I think organisations like Factory come in, because it's not just about the formal education, it's about that wider culture.
Kiran, I think one thing I'm particularly interested in is a conversation around inclusion.
Yeah.
Because, you know, and I experienced this at the BBC, that there's no successful diversity without inclusion. So you can get a number of people of different genders, different colours, different class.
Yeah, for sure.
But if ultimately the people running it are middle class of one particular nationality or race, you end up exactly. Just seeing brown people in your building isn't enough, you know. And if you're not talking to them, and especially if you're not listening to them, which I experienced, you're not going to get anywhere. So tell me what Factory are doing to make sure that the environment for young people coming in is not just diverse,
but it's inclusive. Yeah, it's the key thing that we do, and I'll kind of put it for an example right now. So we're running a programme for 16 to 25-year-olds who are NEET, which is a phrase you'll see in the news over the next coming days because of all the youth unemployment. So we were to focus on accessibility. A lot of the issues our young people are facing are things like mental health issues, actually leaving their house and arriving at a space. There's a higher rate of diagnosis for neurodivergence as well, and a lot of young people are grappling with what does that mean. So we've implemented loads of different things. I mean, I will pay from the budget for taxis so someone can come straight from their house to the building so they can avoid triggering things potentially for them like public transport. But we'll also do things like an access rider, which is where we sit down with the young person and talk through a range of settings and try and figure out what could be a potential trigger, what could be the kind of resulting action that we can take to support them. So having a quiet space, having a buddy system. So it's really thinking about an individual level, because I think what happens with diversity inclusion becomes blanket. It becomes, here's a category of people and here's how you expect them to act, which is very reductive. And you're smiling because I think you will have experienced that yourself. We all get categorized, but really you still need to remember there's an individual, different individual needs. So access riders are really key, speaking with them. Then from there, it's about representation, so it's still important. So thinking about the guest speakers we get in, because as we've all experienced, if you come from a background that isn't represented, there was probably a person in particular that helped you to believe. Mine was the guitarist from Sum 41 who was Asian, which led to me playing electric guitar. I saw that when I was 8 years old. I was like, no way. And then that led to me doing exactly that. So it is that simplistic. Like, we can get really complex, but seeing people who you can connect with on some basis, whether it is because of being from a working class background, refugee asylum seeker status, that can be the sort of catalyst for you to get up and do something. So whenever we deliver our courses, we'll make sure that guest speakers, tutors are from a diverse range of backgrounds to make sure there's plurality. I think the consistent thing is just training, because inclusion is constantly evolving. So being open to different ways of doing things and not getting stuck in the past, because as we've seen, certain terms get very outdated. For example, BME, BAME. Yeah. At one point, that was a very useful term. Now, it's a bit reductive. So I think it's been open that things are changing and that you have to have, a reactive, proactive approach to inclusion.
Absolutely. And talking of bespoke ways of doing things, I think it's really interesting how the Marion Centre itself tailors courses for specific needs. I mean, how do you do that so effectively in Belfast?
Well, each student follows their own pathway, and we do that from the bottom up. Rather than going away and creating a curriculum and expecting a child to fit in this particular box that somebody else created, we find that impacts on their mental health. So we spend a lot of time at the beginning coaching with them and find out what is it you actually want to do. Deep down inside, they usually do know what they want to do, but if they've sort of been talked out of it because it hasn't been a safe job, maybe it's not something that they could actually access. We talk about accessibility, it's very important, but also it's not seen as a safe career, and maybe there's not the opportunity there. So once we, sometimes it can take 1 or 2 sessions, sometimes we get it out in the first session, but once we actually find out, then we facilitate that. But what we find is a lot of the children are following similar pathways because it's a pathway that they want to explore that isn't in the curriculum or they can't access outside school, and this is what frustrates them. So, and that's what obviously gives them no sense of purpose in the world. So doing it that way, where they tell me what they want to do, and then I facilitate that. That's what makes it work best, and they're engaged then from the beginning.
Listening,
yeah, 100%
right.
Listening, yeah,
that's
true, yeah.
That's the big mistake that so many organisations make. They're not in listening mode.
No, definitely not. Yeah, you're right. Listening, yeah, it's just giving. Actually, sometimes they say this is the first time somebody's actually listened to what I would like to do, and actually give me the opportunity to follow that pathway. So yeah, 100%. Yeah, listening's key.
Well, interesting as well. I think hopefully we've moved on from the idea that being inclusive, being diverse is some form of charity.
Yeah.
Because for the longest time, trust me, I'm old, it was that. It was like, we're doing you a jolly good favour by having more brown people around.
Yeah.
But now hopefully businesses will understand that it's mission critical. Right? You've got to have a diversity of creative thought and background in order to really be creative in what you're doing. Otherwise, you're just not going to be. No. I want to talk about immersive technologies with you, Andy, and specifically the potential for immersive tech to generate new opportunities. Firstly, let's get our definitions right. What do we understand by the term immersive tech?
Well, I suspect that if you ask the audience here what immersive tech means, you'll get about 150 different definitions.
Yeah.
But I think, for me, actually, just bearing what you're saying about listening, a lot of what we've done, so I work with the MediaCity Immersive Technologies Innovation Hub, which is an Innovate UK funded innovation accelerator based over the water just at the host building here in MediaCity. And what's been really interesting over this last year is listening to a lot of the industry and how they think about the dynamic transformations that are taking place within their world, part of which is framed by immersive. And I think within that, you get a sense of the breadth of definitions of immersive, because of course we know that cultural experiences, creativity has been immersive for centuries.
Yes.
And so there's an element of this discussion that's very sort of intellectual and very focused on things like VR, but actually it's a much broader set of ideas that surround that space that in fact are making it a really rich place, whether it is kind of immersive theatre with mixed reality type experiences. I think when we talk about it kind of economically, we think about new forms of audience experience which are often built upon new kind of technological platforms, but equally what's happening at Factory is all incredibly immersive in a whole variety of ways. I think one of the interesting things that we've learned listening to industry over this year through the hub is just how there's both an excitement around immersive capabilities. So how can we've got one really interesting project trying to create immersive sound experiences within gaming worlds. So at the moment, you have pretty much stereosonic sound within a game. How can you make it more spatial, more immersive? And those are really interesting innovations. But equally, how do you think about that broader experience of what game playing involves, not just what's taking place in the experience, but also around it, so the social element. And we found a lot of people working in gaming, especially as it gets closer towards things like esports, it is that social physical space that matters still, which is why we have such fascinating conversations about what should a future theatre look like, where you have these kind of immersive theatrical stagings. And that aspect, I think, is really exciting, but it also expands that definition beyond the kind of focus that we've seen over the last decade on just headsets.
Right, very important. Kiran, look, people working in the creative industries, I think about a third of them are self-employed, right? That's double the rate of the kind of wider workforce. So what is it that the Factory Academy are doing to help people kind of navigate the precarious nature of choosing the creative industries? Yeah,
so like you said, there's a lot of freelancers. And the great thing about us, maybe compared to a uni, we can be a lot more agile and responsive to curriculum. So we have developed a course called Foundations in Freelance, which was a 6-week course that went from everything to doing your taxes, setting up a self-employed, to personal branding. So we will actually create...
Can I do that? I'm not really good at that.
We don't do nepotism. But these courses are very responsive to what the reality is. And we can design a course in 2 to 3 months if needed, and have the funding for it there in place and make it completely free of charge, paying for food, transport. So they will come at no cost to anybody to attend these courses. And then we've also gone a bit step further and thought about, well, every artist should probably be an entrepreneur as well. And there's this weird sort
often
of...
without knowing it.
Well, they are, of course.
Right? They'll say, I'm not an entrepreneur. It's like, okay, you absolutely are.
Yeah, exactly. You're having to think of your own product if you were to go into that entrepreneur sort of lingo. So currently we're delivering a course called Business X Creativity, where they will learn about intellectual property, which obviously is something that was a big problem for the Hacienda days for a lot of artists who didn't actually know about intellectual property, who maybe didn't end up with the money that they should have had. So covering all those bases that sometimes you don't associate with artists, which is the things as well like project management. A lot of artists might think, I can never fulfill my ideas. It must be me. Well, it's actually probably you haven't ever had that professional skill development of what is a brief, what is the risk assessment, what is the options appraisal, and all these things which maybe artists kind of avoid, but taking those professional angles which you would use to make a building like Factory International, like Aviva Studios, and helping artists to see that there are different methods you can apply to improve the chances of you doing what you want to do. So yeah, I think it's really important to focus on entrepreneurialism in the creative industries because there is limited opportunity as well. So we also have to say, if you can't access these big institutions, do it yourself, start your own thing. Here's the tools to do it.
Just a follow-up question before I go to Joanne, which is one about, it's interesting because my generation are now employers, and just talking to a lot of people I know as CEOs and chairs, etc., they feel that there's a very different attitude from Gen Z to what they're willing to accept. Yeah. I came through the music industry in the 90s where you were working, you just worked. It was like 24 hours. People calling you at 3 o'clock in the morning and wondering what they needed, right? And what's brilliant about Gen Z is they're saying, no, there's barriers to that, right? We're going to set up our own kind of, and we're not doing that anymore. Mm-hmm. How are you helping to navigate that kind of generational expectation between a generation of employers who were built in a certain way and a younger generation coming through who have very different expectations?
Yeah, I mean, I just turned 31, so even I feel I might not be the employer, but I'm now the line managers of Gen Z. I think you just have to keep yourself in check and be open to, you're not always right, and there are different ways of doing things. I think there's that classic thing that can happen to you where you stop listening to new music and you become a bit outdated slowly, and no one actually wants to become that. So I think there's just that level of self-reflection to admit that just because the way we did something was established doesn't mean it's the right way. And I have to keep myself in check with that, because my approach to work is like, get it done at all costs. And I've reflected in the past few years, how has that impacted me? And actually seeing a younger generation, like you said, who put in boundaries in, there is something in that. I think it's all about balance though. And I think that, just because you're now taking this approach doesn't completely negate the past. Right. I'm sure that people above you probably have the same argument. But it's like we were doing with inclusion, it's openness and listening and making sure that when someone is heard, you can put something in place to accommodate that. And luckily, because of technology, we can actually put in place most things. Right. If you are autistic and have sensory overload in the office, you can work from home. You know what I mean? So there are actually solutions now where in the past, that there might not have been.
Yeah, pre-lockdowns, if you wanted to work from home, my God. They were like saying, you can work from home, but for another job. I think was the plan then. Skills for urban and rural futures. Let's talk about that. Surf. What are the ambitions for Surf, Joanne? And how is the Marion Centre involved?
Well, Surf has been instrumental in allowing our young people to have access to the latest software and opportunities. Surf is working with partnership with NI Screen. So they have give us the equipment, Unreal Engine, which is used in making games such as Fortnite and in the film industry. They've given us the machines and the software to allow the children to actually, who want to do those courses, who come to us and through coaching they want to be gamers, want to be animators. It's all well and good them wanting to do it, but I have to have the software to facilitate that. I have to make sure that I have the latest up-to-date technology so that they can have the opportunities that exist in Belfast, in particular in the film industry. They give us the machines, and then somebody from Ulster University would come in and they would teach the children how to obviously use Unreal Engine to make game and animation. And then they will be the future trainers, these young people. So they will train the next generation, the next set of kids. I was going to say next generation, but it'll be quicker than that. The next set of learners, and then this will just be continuing a carousel. So it means that we're building up a lot of people who are highly skilled in an area where employment is in demand, and then they can go into the film industry, and when they, as well as working freelance and doing being an entrepreneur, because entrepreneurs are very creative. So it gives them the opportunity. So I feel like we're the bridge between the children and the film industry, where there is a lot of jobs. And it also allows them to work in partnership, because there's myself was involved with other centres throughout Northern Ireland, and they're getting to mix with children, collaborating with other children. Belfast has changed, but it's still quite segregated. So they might meet people from other backgrounds and other religions and everything else. So this allows them to mix with other children from different backgrounds, without actually forcing it through like peace or, you know, these normal usual schemes they have to try and force children into. They're not being forced naturally, they're just getting to mix with people, and it's sort of overcoming those differences through game and animation. And it's also not only in Belfast, it's also in rural areas as well. So the opportunities are for throughout Northern Ireland. So it has been instrumental for the children actually to gain not only the skills but also relevant, up-to-date technology, using that up-to-date technology skills, and where there is going to be jobs in demand. So we're very grateful for the NI screen to be picked to be part of that project.
Brilliant. Now I've got one quick fire question for each of you, or you give me the answer to this question. What is one big change you would like to see happen in the training and skills sector? Andy, I'll start with you.
The one big change, I guess for me, it is about that integration of recognition of the value, the things that Factory are doing, what we're trying to do over at our newly formed Dream Lab in MediaCity, which is trying to bring more people into that space to understand things. I mean, your quote, there's a point in your life where you stop listening to new music, for me is such a fantastic example of what we all should not be doing.
Yes.
And I think that principle should guide everything that we do creatively.
Yes, yeah. When someone asks me what's your favourite album, I always answer, I haven't heard it yet.
That's really good.
Kind of the best way to do it. Kiran?
Earn as you learn. In other countries, you can actually, be paid to learn, which is quite the idea, isn't it? It's one of those ones, if you are in a point where you have a job, it's too much of a risk to leave it to retrain and do something you might want to do. So after all this austerity, I think we've been led to believe that we can't have nice things, and it shouldn't be a nice thing education, so you should be able to access it, but not at a cost to your livelihood.
Absolutely. Joanne?
I would like to see a change in mindset where the careers in the creative industry are seen as valuable careers, and parents are encouraging their children to go into them rather than trying for them to go into maybe safe jobs, traditional roles, that they're actually encouraging them to go into the creative industries because they can see the value in it, and that there's opportunities for children in Belfast that NI Screen are creating those opportunities, and people can, when they see children get into them, they see this, there's opportunities, our children can stay here, they can get a job, a good job, and they don't have to leave the city.
Yeah, so, someone once, an Asian person said that Asians have two coming out options. One is sexuality, the other one is when they tell their parents they're going to be a creative. Mum, Dad, I want to work in the arts. No! Okay, that kind of happens. Yeah. But thankfully, I'm not sure that happens as much anymore, which is really good. Ladies and gentlemen, what a fantastic panel there. Andy, Miah, Kiran, Sethi and Joanne Dunn. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.